Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the fellowship, and welcome if you're joining us by Zoom. My name is Miranda Van Horn, and I'll be your lay leader this morning. We welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown, our religiously liberal spiritual home, where our intention is to go beyond religious tolerance to understanding, kindness, and respect. We practice going beyond religious tolerance to understanding, kindness, and respect. We practice presuming good intentions in others and each other, considering carefully the potential result of words and actions. We enrich our community by encouraging diversity. Whoever you are, we're glad you're here. We cultivate the health of our fellowship through shared ministry, giving cheerfully of ourselves since we are able to the tasks we choose together. We support one another in all phases of life and nurture the growth and education of our children. We're grateful to our UU predecessors, especially the ones who built this fellowship with their hands and with their hearts. Welcome to our beloved community. Now is the time for announcements. So if you have an announcement that pertains to the UUFP, please come forward, give your name, and share.
Hello everyone, my name is Clifford, and it's this coming Saturday morning, starting at 10, that I'll be doing a cooking demo in the kitchen right here. And what I'm going to be doing is taking a whole turkey and breaking it down into a bunch of different parts and cooking each part differently. So you get a bunch of different dishes instead of just the usual whole roasted turkey. And a number of people are coming already, and hope everyone comes.
Anyone else? Good. So that means that now is the time to put your phone on Do Not Disturb if you haven't done that already. And I need chalice lighted this morning. Thank you, CJ. This morning we light the chalice for the quiet within us, for the stillness in us, for the silence that will hold us. There are deep places in the soul. Here may we find peace. This morning's speaker serves as minister for the UUs of Central Delaware in Dover. She has a Master of Divinity degree from Moravian Theological Seminary and has served UU congregations in Madison, Connecticut, and Stroudsburg, PA. Lucky for us, she has recently agreed to speak here at UUFP on the first Sundays of each month. Welcome, Reverend Ken Wilson.
Thank you very much.
Here in this sacred space, we stop, we pause, we pay attention. We free ourselves from the compulsion of projects to finish, work to be done, things to accomplish. We journey down into the quiet center within us, where we live from moment to moment on an island of peace. We apprehend the world from our quiet center. In this instant are the whirling orbs, the movement of earth and sky, the inhalation and exhalation of our breath. Here in this fragile moment is the culmination of all that has been and the promise of all that shall be. Come, let us worship together. Let's join now together in singing in our gray hymnals, number 163, for the earth forever turning. I'd like to invite Megan to come forward now, and she has a story for us this morning. So I'd like to invite all the children to come up too, and you can get yourself a mat to sit on to be more comfortable. Or this mic. I'll put that here. It's all that here. Yeah, there. There's no doubt. John over here with the chair. All right. This is your daughter.
Today's story is The Flowers Are Calling. The flowers are calling a little black bear. No, not a bear. He doesn't care. They're calling a butterfly to dip in the air. The flowers are calling the wet green frog. No, not a frog. She likes her soggy bog. They are calling a bumblebee to look near their log. The flowers are calling a loud blue jay. Not a jay, he wouldn't say. They're calling a honeybee to fly their way. The flowers are calling a little moose. Not a moose. Why would he care about a flower? They're calling the beetle to eat their pollen loose. The flowers are calling the rabbit to stop. No, not a rabbit. It's not their habit to call a rabbit. He might grab it. They're calling a bee to fly to spot their bees. The flowers are calling a small brown snake. No, not a snake, for goodness sake. They're calling a pollen wasp with nectar to take. The flowers are calling a fat raccoon. No, not a raccoon. He doesn't care for the white moon. They're calling a moth in the light of the moon. The flowers are calling a desert deer. No, not a deer. He can't even get near. They're calling a nectar bat to flap over here. The flowers are calling a busy wren. He's not a wren, he's already seen them. They're calling some children to look again. Would you believe the great flowers? Out to pollinate and to nourish. And how many animals do not even notice? The end.
Right, let's sing the children out. Children out in peace and thank you. To enter into a time of meditation now, and we'll begin with singing Spirit of Life, and we'll remain seated for that. I'm going to invite us into guided meditation, and it's meditation on the body. This is adapted from Eckhart Tolle from his book, The Power of Now. Direct your attention into the body. Feel it from within. Is it alive? Is there life in your hands, your arms, your legs and feet, in your abdomen, your chest? Can you feel the subtle energy field that pervades the entire body and gives vibrant life to every organ and every cell? Can you feel it simultaneously in all parts of the body as a single field of energy? Keep focusing on the feeling of your inner body for a few moments. Do not start to think about it. Feel it. The more attention you give it, the clearer and stronger this feeling will become. It will feel as if every cell is becoming more alive. Pay more attention to the feeling than any image that may arise. The feeling of your inner body is formless, limitless, and unfathomable. You can always go into it more deeply. If you cannot feel very much at this stage, pay attention to whatever you can feel. That's good enough for the moment. Just focus on the feeling. Your body is coming alive. Please open your eyes now, but keep some attention in the inner energy field of the body, even as you look around the room. The inner body lies at the threshold of your form and your essence, your true nature. Let's continue to focus on our body, on our breath, for about a minute.
And it's time for the offering. The contributions are a tangible commitment to the vision, and the vision of the congregation. The gifts are accepted with gratitude. Thank you.
Our drifting awareness, our tendency to take the path of least resistance by being less than fully awake to the present moment, creates a void. And the time-bound mind, which has been designed to be a useful servant, compensates by proclaiming itself master. Like a butterfly flitting from one flower to another, the mind engages past experiences or, projecting its own made-for-television movie, anticipates what is to come. Seldom do we find ourselves resting in the oceanic depth of the here and now. For it is here, in the now, where we find our true self, which lies beyond our physical body, shifting emotions, and chattering mind. Let's join in singing hymn number 90, Threat and Fever of the Day. There's a story about the Buddha that takes place shortly after he experienced enlightenment. The poet, writer, and teacher Mark Nepo tells it this way. When Buddha rose from the Bodhi tree, it is said a monk approached him in utter amazement at his luminosity and asked, "Oh, Holy One, what are you? You must be a god." The Buddha, not thinking of himself as anything but present, answered, "No, not a god," and kept walking. But the dazzled monk persisted. "Then you must be a deva." And the Buddha stopped and said, "No, not a deva," and kept walking. Still, the monk pursued him, saying, "Then you must be Brahma, the creator God himself." At this, Buddha simply uttered, "No." The monk, confused, implored, "Then what are you? Please tell me, what are you?" The Buddha could not repress his joy, and he replied, I am awake. And then Mark Nepo asks, can it be that our purpose is simply to be awake? Awake to the now, awake to what is really real. Oh, I see what my printer did. Okay. There's more words on the back. So Eckhart Tolle, who's today a successful author and spiritual teacher, would probably agree that this is our purpose, to be awake. For the first 3 decades of his life, Tolle says that there was a sense of great fear of life for him, fear of the future, fear of the meaninglessness, and underneath it all, fear of facing any of it. He'd had a difficult childhood with parents who were in conflict and finally divorced. He moved from Germany to Spain and then to England. And at school, he had few friends, and he always felt like an outsider. He pursued a university education, but the more he continued his intellectual search, the stronger the sense of despair came. What's the point in continuing to live with this burden of misery, he asked himself. And a single thought kept repeating itself. I cannot live with myself any longer. And then it dawned on him what he was saying. I, myself, am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I and the self that I cannot live with. Maybe, he thought, only one of them is real. He goes on, I was so stunned by this realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. I was gripped by an intense fear, and my body started to shake. I heard the words, resist nothing, as if spoken from inside my chest. Eckhart then had the sensation of being sucked into a void. The fear vanished, and he fell into the void. And he recalls nothing after that. But then he woke up, and he heard the sound of a bird chirping outside his window. And he thought it was as beautiful as a precious diamond. He opened his eyes, and the first light of morning was filtering through the curtains. That soft luminosity of light was love itself. Tears came into his eyes. He got up, and he walked around his room. It was as if he had never seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, he says, as if it had just come into existence. He picked up things, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and the aliveness of it all. He knew he had experienced something profoundly significant, but he didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later, after he had read spiritual texts and spent time with spiritual teachers, that he realized that what had happened to him is what everybody else is looking for. He had found a sense of pure inner peace that has never left him. Whereas some people in despair might have had a breakdown, he had a shift up into a state of enlightenment, of awareness. It's been more than 40 years since Eckhart's transformation, and his awakened state has never left him, although it does fluctuate in its intensity. Even when life is turbulent, there's still a sense of peace and stillness. It's a timeless state of conscious presence in the now. Eckhart Tolle's transformation is unusual, but in its essence, it's not extremely rare. There are dozens or maybe more accounts of people who have undergone a similar kind of breakdown and reformation after intense turmoil in their lives. People like Tolle, who suffered from severe depression, or who had cancer, like Mark Nepo, whom I studied with last summer. People who were alcoholics and hit rock bottom. Others who became extremely disabled, or who experienced a different severe stress to their psyches. Like Tolle, they all reached a point of despondency, feeling utterly lost and broken. They felt they had no choice but to surrender to their circumstances. When they did, these individuals had profound insights into the true nature of reality, what mattered and what did not, and the background noise of their minds went quiet. Of a more temporary nature, but still profound, other portals have led people to this place of peace and presence. Psychedelics, for example. Let's see here. I'm going to have to be searching for my pages here. Here we go. Psychedelics, yes, have been known to have this transformative effect. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. But also there was a recent study down at Johns Hopkins that documented this with a group of people who had terminal diagnoses. They were able to live out the rest of their lives having received the gift of peace. Buddhists practice samatha, mindfulness, which focuses on developing calmness, clarity, and equanimity. There have been mystics and poets, Sufi whirling dervishes and indigenous practitioners, all of whom speak of these experiences using different language, but all pointing to the same thing. The fact is that words cannot adequately convey the profundity and nature of a reality that is ultimately ineffable. Probably more of us have had brief moments of this kind of transformative, or what some might call mystical experiences. Moments when the inner chatter ceases and reality seems super real and the present moment feels super present. Mostly these events are unpredictable and cannot be repeated on command. As writer, poet, and Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson lamented, "If only I could east myself and find the sun." I myself have had a number of these kinds of brief periods, some lasting for minutes and others for just a few moments. So I know both the beauty and the limitations. They can't usually be called forth at will, and the limitations of our language make it impossible to convey the fullness of these times. Tolle tells how after his transformation, he basically sat on a park bench for 2 years in a state of the most intense joy. People would come up to him and say, "I want what you have. Can you show me how to get it?" And Tolle would say to them, "You have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise." Because he believes that each person carries the seed of enlightenment within themselves, he realized it was time to get up off the park bench and become a spiritual teacher. And that's exactly what Eckhart Tolle did. He began to lead seminars, meditation classes, and private counseling sessions. The questions his student asked and the answers he developed led to a book, The Power of Now. Since its publication almost 25 years ago, it has sold over 2 million copies and has been translated into over 30 languages. Have any of you read the book or seen the book? I read it some years ago, and last winter, I picked it up again. As he says in his introduction, people may read the book and get something out of it, and if they go back to it later, they may be able to understand and follow more of it. That's what happened to me. It's not that it's difficult to follow. Tolle, whose first language is German, is very orderly and logical in the way he presents the material, all of which is designed to help readers on their own path to enlightenment. I had a hard time last winter. I seemed to suffer from seasonal affective disorder, and for a combination of reasons, I think it hit me very hard. I picked up the book again sometime in March. This time there was so much more that I was ready to take in. One of the most important concepts he explains is the ego, which he simply calls the mind. When he was at his low point, he recognized the existence of two parts of his consciousness, his true or authentic self and his constructed self or his ego, what he calls the mind, the voice that chatters endlessly in our heads. The greatest obstacle to experiencing a state of peace, that place of ultimate reality, Tolle says, is the erroneous belief that that chattering stream is us, and we mistakenly identify with our thoughts. Not being able to stop thinking is a terrible affliction, he says, but we don't realize it because almost everyone does it, and so we think of it as normal. Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am," did not proclaim a great truth, but a great error, according to Tolle. A great error because it is our thinking, the never-ending mental noise that keeps us from finding the realm of inner stillness that lies underneath it. That mental noise is generated by the ego. Now, the ego has a job. Its job is to keep us alive. But if we allow it to run rampant, it casts a shadow of fear and anxiety, and therefore suffering, over our lives. The beginning of freeing ourselves from the tricky ego is what Tolle calls watching the thinker. Sometimes I call it taking the balcony view. Taking a step back and listening and watching is the first step in what's also called mindfulness. When we listen to that voice, it's important to listen to it impartially, without judgment. If we're judging and condemning ourselves, it means that that same ego voice has come in through the back door. The ego has lots of tricks. That's why the Buddhists call it the monkey mind, because it just jumps around and shows up everywhere. As we listen and notice that voice, we're not only aware of the thought, but we're also aware of ourselves as witness to the thought. This means we have discovered a new dimension of our consciousness. The witness is our deeper, authentic self. And it's interesting, from the position of your authentic self, once you call out the ego as in, "Oh, I see what you're doing," judging us, making us worried, etc., the thought loses its power over us and becomes kind of like a deflating balloon. I so needed to hear this. I went through a lot of change last year. I have a list here. Got retired, got divorced, moved, lost my brother, started a job. And I'll tell you, my monkey mind was having a field day in here. There were also a couple of family issues that I was dealing with. And so a bunch of repetitive, negative thoughts just parked themselves there in my mind, and they wouldn't leave and they wouldn't shut up. They allowed me no peace, no quiet. As Tolle explains, the mind always seeks to deny the now and to escape from it. It wants to keep us from the now because otherwise it would lose control, which is very threatening to it. Well, it was definitely getting what it wanted. Now, I'm going to try to explain a concept Tolle introduces, which is the pain body. And he devotes a whole chapter, but I'm going to give you a summary. Basically, I picture it as a blob of jelly. This pain body is the accumulation of all the pain we've ever experienced. And when there's any current experience it recognizes as familiar, it will rise up to the surface, lock itself in place, and torture us by dominating our thoughts. Thoughts and feelings about our life then become deeply negative and destructive, and in some cases can drive a person to suicide. The pain body, of course, it's part of the ego. It doesn't want us to observe it directly and see it for what it is. But as soon as we call up our witness, our authentic self, and look at that pain body blob from over the rail of the balcony, Tolle says that our identification with the pain body is broken. It's not us. As soon as we say, I see you, and I know what you're trying to do, it can't use us anymore pretending to be us. And I hope this is making some sense. In being able to witness our mind, Tolle says, you have found your innermost strength. You have found the power of now. When I read this, I felt that I'd been freed from the grip of this pain I was experiencing. And if any of you know exactly what I'm talking about, I hope that hearing these words will free you too. In April, I took a trip to South Carolina, and I remember hiking along a woodland trail on a gorgeous spring day. Suddenly, I noticed my mind doing its thing and keeping me from appreciating the beauty and wonder all around me. I told myself, get out of your head and into the world. I've been practicing mindfulness since the previous fall, but I was ready to take things to a whole new level. I realized I don't always actually have to be thinking anything. This is what Tolle calls the gap of no mind. I find it to be kind of like trying to balance on a bicycle when it's not moving. You ever tried that? It's usually hard to keep it going for more than a few seconds. But we can learn to take every opportunity to deepen our experience of the present. I do this with my meals. I give the food and my eating experience my full attention. We can pay attention to every step, every movement when we go up or down the stairs. Whenever we think of it, we can observe the flow of our breath. Washing our hands, we can notice the details of our hands, the sensation of the water flowing over them, the scent of the soap, and how it feels. Tolle tells us there is one certain criterion by which you can measure your success in this practice: the degree of peace that you feel within. Enlightenment, he says, is simply a natural state of felt oneness. It's a state of connectedness with something that is immeasurable and indestructible, something that is in us, and yet much more than us. This is what spiritual seekers have been striving for throughout the ages, and what the sages have taught for millennia. Tolle says, there is and always has been only one spiritual teaching, although it comes in many forms. The world religions scholar Houston Smith describes it like this: underlying the human self and animating it is a reservoir of being that is unrestricted consciousness and bliss. There are so many ways to explain the ineffable, but ultimately it can only be experienced. Perhaps it is enough to say, as Buddha did, that we are awake. And perhaps it's enough to say that our purpose is simply to be awake, to discover the power of now. May it be so. Let's turn to hymn number 350, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time. join in our unison benediction. You'll find that in your order of service. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings.
We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and in this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond.